Greetings and welcome to week 2 of the adult learner, where we're really going to be addressing that question, who is the adult learner? There'll be a video warm-up like this each week during the semester, and I'd like to point out that these really are meant to be warm-ups, not necessarily overviews. It's not my intention to summarize the text readings or to critique them. In fact, there'll be some times when you may notice I'm not really making reference to the readings at all. What I'm trying to do really is set a stage for you to give you a different voice that you can compare to your own experiences as well as to what you'll see when you're doing the readings. And to sort of set the stage for you to be reflective about the reading assignments as you move towards completing your 4R assignments. So this week, we really want to address this question of who is the adult learner. And this is actually kind of a muddy question to answer in my mind. You may have noticed that your authors don't really do a great job of making a very explicit definition for you. And I think this is really a reflection of the squishiness of both the terms adult and learner. Our objectives in this module really are to give you the opportunity to develop some multiple approaches for defining these two terms and to understand what the concept means when we put the two words together to describe an adult learner. And this is going to be your initial conceptualization, and don't be surprised to think that as you internalize it, it will evolve during the course as we encounter different ideas and different authors. So let's start with learn. What do we mean by to learn? And we'll see later in the course that the various learning theories that endeavor to explain learning are rooted in how one defines learning. If you define it differently as a phenomenon to explain, you're going to come up with a different theory to explain it. So last week I asked you to come up with your own definitions, and to a large extent, as you saw yourself by looking at what was posted in the discussion forum, covered a wide variety of ideas, which can more or less be matched up to some of the things that I'll share with you here. For instance, there are people who put a great emphasis on the idea that learning is a change in behavior. This concept applies not only to training pets and Pavlov's dog experiments, but also to human behaviors. Or learning can be viewed as an information processing pathway that takes place in the brain and involves inputs, throughputs, and outputs. And this approach to learning focuses attention on memory and the fact that memories can dissolve away over time, and that true learning is accomplished when memories are recoverable after a hiatus in use or exposure and put into use again. Or there's also definitions of learning that suggest that this is a process that can be viewed as a developmental pathway that a person takes based on their needs, including learning experiences that transform understandings and beliefs, along with the nature of those developmental and transformative pathways themselves. Some definitions of learning also consider the learning process. Can, for instance, be seen as a process of knowledge transmission from the expert who has the knowledge to the novice learner who needs it. Or we can also look at learning as being the construction of knowledge either by the individual or in a social context with other learners. Regardless of the nature of learning and how it's defined, the brain is changed as a result. Evolutionary psychologist Henry Plotkin put this in the way that's stated here, that when we come to know something, performed and acted as biologicals when we digest something. And this neurological, biological aspect of learning is why we can't neglect what we know about learning from neuroscience, which is one of the topics we'll take up late in the semester. So moving away from the learn part of our definition, let's think about who we would include as being an adult when talking about adult learners. Perhaps the greatest ambiguity in the study of adult learning is to consider who we will include as being an adult. there are at least 4 viable definitions of the word. For instance, there's a biological definition. We become adults when we reach the age at which we can reproduce, which in human development terminology is actually during early adolescence rather than during adulthood. And there are also legal definitions, such as when one is old enough to vote, or to serve in the military, or to take on some other adult responsibility. There are also social definitions, such as being adults when we start performing adult roles, perhaps being a full-time worker, a spouse, a parent, and objectives in the social world of those sorts. And then there are psychological definitions of an adult. That time when we arrive at a self-concept, and includes being responsible for our own lives, of being self-directed, a term that we'll return to frequently during the semester. And given the association of learning processes with psychology, this sort of a definition seems most relevant to us, but it can be difficult to assess for each individual. There are also changes through life. Adults shift their self-direction focus from goal setting, which means committed to investing our means into attaining a desired outcome, to actually pursuing goals, the actual implementation of means in order to achieve a certain outcome, as well as maintenance of goals through life. But are these psychological transitions always seen only among people we normally think of as adults? One way to think of adult learning as being different in most practical cases from pre-adult learning is to distinguish adult learning from formal classroom learning. In other words, to distinguish it from school. School learners usually focus on short-term goals of getting grades, passing from one grade level to the next, and ultimately graduating with a degree. And the standards for achieving those goals are set by someone else. Adult learners, in contrast, are generally viewed as learning outside of school and with self-directed goals that may be related to human resource development, adult education, and personal enrichment through continuing education. So in this context, adult learning can be viewed as based more strongly upon choices, needs, goals, and learning experiences that are controlled by the learner, rather than the dominating role of teachers in most academic settings. Nonetheless, a lot of training for adult learners has that same teacher-directed appearance as a school classroom, perhaps because trainers' experiences with teaching draw from their own time as classroom learners at an earlier age. And on the flip side, not all pre-adult learning takes place in classrooms. Elements of self-directed learning, commonly influenced by expert parents, coaches, and mentors, occurs at all ages, including very youthful ages. And there's also informal learning that applies to people of all ages. Whereas adult learning concepts originated when college students were overwhelmingly 18 to 22 years old, pursuing college full-time, and were unmarried, we need to accept that a substantial number of college learners are now adult learners. Once classified as non-traditional, adult learners of 25 years of age and older have comprised close to 40% of the college-going population for the last 2 decades. Spanning a range of backgrounds and experiences, learners that include Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans, GED credential holders, and middle-aged professionals and skilled workers. And many of these folks are in career transition. Nonetheless, I think that we can see adult learners as being best described by this concept map. The diagram focuses attention on the needs of adult learners to learn solutions to relevant problems within the context of the experiences they have accumulated through decades of life, including employment and life experiences, and with some degree of self-direction. This conceptualization of the adult learner can be traced primarily to the work of Malcolm Knowles, beginning around 1970, and we'll return to the meanings of the linked concepts in this diagram throughout the course. And lastly, I'd like to connect some of these notions of adult learning and the distinction from the learning that takes place earlier in life to my work in faculty development. See, faculty development, essentially teaching professional development for educators, is sitting at the intersection of a number of ideas that are borrowed partly from education and partly from the business world. First of all, development has in it that word develop. It implies a change. And a large part of any kind of human resource development work involves managing that change and helping to understand the cognition of change, including the tendency for the human brain to want to resist changes. This development takes place within the context of some sort of an organization, in this case, the university. And so you have to think about the context of the behaviors and the learning that take place within that organizational context. We're always trying to translate what we know about research about learning processes, such as learning science, into practice. And this realm of endeavor, called implementation science, is actually indicating that it's very, very difficult to transfer what we learn in a research context into actual practice. And we'll be applying some ideas from adult learning theory later on in the course that you'll see relate to work in human resource development, in this case, faculty development, and what's called situated professional learning. I've made this diagram to help guide my conversations with faculty and administrators at the School of Medicine as we contemplate what we should be doing in developing programming for faculty development. And I try to point out that there's some differences between what goes on in college instruction and what we should be doing in training the faculty that deliver that instruction. So on the left side are terms and processes that I relate more closely to what happens in college. And on the right are terms and processes and ideas, which you'll already notice probably connect to some of the things that I've already talked about that relate to faculty development. And you can almost sort of imagine putting little sliders on those white bars and then positioning them to one side or the other to characterize the nature of any kind of professional learning experience that is designed. And I try to do this in a conceptual way with my own design of faculty development programming and in working with other facilitators. So we might go through in each of these categories and kind of in a admittedly subjective way, sort of move the slider somewhere. And in my mind, we always want to be on the right side of the middle. So hopefully this warm-up helps put some ideas into your mind as you head forth into the reading for the week and to your 4R assignment. Some things you might think about is whether your definition of adult learner is changing since you were first asked to define the term in the first week, and how your approach to learning and the nature of your learning experiences has maybe changed during your own life that help you see the difference between learning in adulthood versus learning earlier in your life. As well as how can you use your current and building knowledge of adult learning in the other courses you might be taking currently, in your job, or in your future career. And that will wrap up our warm-up for this week. And I'll look forward to hearing any questions you may send to me by email, and especially to learning your insights through the 4R assignments that you submit by next Tuesday. Adios.